Welcome back. Today we're going to build the shelves for the sysport, but first, here's a jingle. You remember the dummy drawers that we used to space out the panels on the sysport? Today we're going to make the full real drawer. There's going to be a front piece, and that front piece will overlap the drawer runners, and that's to give me a bit of cosmetic niceness at the front. You will have two sides that will go the full length of the drawer runner. It will have a back piece that will be positioned to make sure that the systainer is nice and secure inside, and there will be a plywood panel in the base that will be routed into position by a number of rebates. We know that the runner is mounting to the side assembly of the drawer, and I want to hide this front runner. So my front piece will overlap like that, so you can start to see how the side construction will come together. So the first job I want to do is to work out how long the front piece needs to be. We'll use some scrap wood and a systainer 1. Just put the systainer 1 on the scrap wood. I can then allow for my two sides, side number 1 and side number 2, and then I can allow for the depth of my runner. So I can now align my drawer runner onto that side there, and I can now make a mark. Put my drawer runner up and make a mark. So the distance between this mark here and this mark here is the length of my front piece. Coming in with a measuring stick, put it up against that end there and put it up against this end here, and that's going to give me a distance of 460 millimeters. That's the length of my front piece, 460 millimeters. I need 20 front pieces, because remember, there's 5 drawers per cabinet, and there's 4 cabinets inside our sysport design. 5 times 4 is 20. So we need to create 20 front pieces. We'll use a combination of the MFT 3 table, and we will use our parallel guides for cutting the things to thickness. If you've not seen us use these, go ahead and check out the video now, and then you'll understand what we're doing. Job 1 is to cut this board to 460 millimeters in length. For that, we are obviously going to use the MFT 3 table. I'm going to use this edge here as my reference edge, so I'm just going to put a mark on there so I know that's my reference edge, and then I want to cut this end off here so I know it's square to that reference edge. I still want to work from my reference edge, so I'll turn that over and push that back against my guide, and now I'll measure from the end that we've just cut 460 millimeters, and I'm going to set that up for the cut. We're going to have to do a few of these, so we'll come in with the stop. Make sure everything's nicely square, everything butted up, and now we'll cut out a couple of these panels. I want to set the distance of these from my cutting edge to accommodate the width of my bracket. I just want to slide that in and then clamp it down. Do the same with this one. Slide it in and clamp it down. Now I can just take my board and I can slide my board forward to those stops, and that is going to give me the cut, a repeatable cut that I need. However, think about what's going to happen. As I move this board forward, it's going to get to the point where it's no longer supported on the MFT table. So I'm going to put a sacrificial piece of wood underneath here, and I'll just take one of the offcuts that I used earlier on. I can now slide that into the cut area, and now I know I can cut safely. Obviously this is now too low, so I need to raise up the overall device. So I can now cut safely to the edge of my board. That's all our fronts cut. We now have 20 front, well, more than 20 fronts, about 25 over there. A couple of spares for testing and things. So next job, I want to go and cut the sides. The sides are going to be narrower than the front. I want to have a small overlap at the front that I can put a profile on, and that's just going to be a draw pull. It just gives your fingers somewhere to rest as you're pulling the drawers forward. So in terms of the width of the sides and the back, I actually want the widths to be from the top of our bracket to the base of the support that goes on the side of the drawers. Remember, the front are full width, the sides are going to be from this point to this point, and that comes out at a measurement of 31 millimeters. So our sides and our back are going to be 31 millimeters. In terms of length, we will make it the length of this runner, and that's the runner that attaches to the side of the drawers. That's an overall length of 345 millimeters. So we'll cut all the sides to 350 millimeters, and that allows us to trim it down to make sure the ends are square, and we'll use the Capex saw for that before we do the final assembly. I'll cut some extra pieces for the backs. We're not going to have a full length back on the drawer, we're just going to have a stop in the middle to stop the systainer sliding off the back of the drawer. So that doesn't need to be full length, so we'll cut a few extra ones as we go. Use exactly the same technique, so I won't video that and go through it. I'll just crack on and get the job done. Take a full length board, I'll cut it down to 350 millimeters in length to give me some panels. I'll then rip the panels using the parallel guides to that 31 millimeter. I'll create 40 for the sides, and then I'll probably just do an extra 5 or 6 just to give me some material for the back stops. See you soon. That's all our back and sides now cut. 47 pieces in the end. There's no magical number or reason behind the 47. I just ripped all the panels I had down, and that's the number that came out, 47. So that's good to go. So the next job is I want to put the groove in all the sides and the front that's going to hold and secure the base of the drawer. The base of the drawer is going to be made out of plywood. In fact, this plywood here at the side of the workshop. I'm taking this wall down and I'm replacing this wall with a cladded wall like this side here, and you'll see that in one of the workshop videos down the line. Here's an offcut of the material. This came from that wall. It's been kicking around the workshop for a while. It's a nominal 12 millimeter ply. In reality, 11.73 millimeters thick. So we will use a 12 millimeter cutter. In terms of the depth of the cut, I want it to be about 5 millimeters. Remember, this is 18 millimeters thick in this direction, so that's going to be fine. Lots of meat either side to secure the drawer runners into, and 5 millimeters is going to give me a nice support. So to do this job, we're going to be using the CMS. Let's set the CMS up for this cut. I'm using a 12 millimeter upcut spiral bit. I'm using that so it takes the chippings away from the cutting surface. I've set this for a 5 millimeter cut. I've found the center of the wood and I've set the fence so that cuts more or less in the middle of the wood. I'm nominating one side on the wood to be the face side. I'm just using a small face mark for that, and I'll be referencing the face side against the side of the fences, and that will give me a cut. We'll come back to that face mark and why I'm referencing from the face when we write out the front pieces, but for now just make sure that we're working on a face side. The final bit, just want to set this up for the cut. Just bringing the feather guard in, making sure I've got some pressure on the feather guard, both downwards and also from the side, and we're ready to go. I'm now going to go ahead and cut all these channels. Just want to check this is actually looking good for the material. That should be a nice snug fit, and it is. So I'm happy with that. So I'm now going to go ahead and cut out all these pieces. All of these are now cut. I've got my face mark so I know which side is my reference side. Next job is I want to cut the front pieces. However, I don't want this groove to go all the way through. I want it to stop. So when this is in position, that groove's continuous all the way around, but it doesn't continue to the visible side of the wood. So the next job is to find out how long this groove needs to be in the wood. I've got a scrap piece of plywood that's 10mm wider than a systainer. The reason it's 10mm wider is because we have put 5mm deep grooves on these pieces of material. So now I can understand where my front needs to go. I can line my front up onto that material and make sure these offsets on this side and this side are equal. Okay, so I've now got a 15mm overhang in each of both sides of that material. I now make a small tick mark on the outside there, and there. So now I know that that's the outside edges of my drawer before the overhang starts. I know that my side pieces are 18mm long. So I now know my groove needs to come 5mm in from those two lines. So those two marks there and there are the 5mm in. So I now can run my groove. As long as it's past that 5mm line and it's not going past this outside tick, then I'm good to go with my groove. So I'm going to take an arbitrary position of there and there, and that's where I want the end of my grooves to finish. The reason I made these face marks is we want to reference everything from the same surface, and when this drawer is assembled, this front piece is going to be flush to these outside edges. So that's going to be my face piece. So I now reference on that without moving the fence. My groove is going to come out in the same place. So I now know where my groove is going to end and I know the reference area, so the distance down the wood is set by the fence, so we're not going to make any changes. I know it's going to be 5mm deep, so I don't need to make any changes to the bit position. So routing this way against that face is going to put that in the right position. What I now need to do is to work out where I stop the groove. All I'm doing now is I'm lining this tick mark up where the groove is going to stop and just eyeballing it to the centre of that bit. I'm now going to loosen the fence off and I'm going to open the fence so it's more or less lining up with the end of the wood. So eyeball the centre of the router bit, line the fence up to more or less the end of the material. Lock that fence into position. Come to the other end, line that tick up with the centre and line the end of the fence up more or less in line with that edge of the material. Now, given that all these pieces of wood are nominally the same, I can now take my end wood there and plunge down with this end of the wood in line with the fence, and I know I've got the start. And when I get to this point here, I can stop and I know I've reached the end of my cut. Make sense? Good. That's going to be a bit harder because I obviously now need to plunge down, and with this fence in the way, I won't be able to plunge down. So we're not going to be using the guard. You do this at your own risk. Be very, very careful. Don't be putting your hands near the cutter. Control the wood from the back. Make your plunge from here with your hands well away from that cutter. Then move along with your push stick. Once you stop, lift up from this end and take it away. And that way your hands are never going to come in contact with this cutter. The good thing about these spiral up cutter bits is they're very, very good for plunge routing. If you're using a straight bit, you don't tend to get the same cutting action, and it tends to burn the wood out in this type of cut. So you can now see how this works. Because I'm referencing from the same side, the tops are all flush. The grooves that we've cut are covered up by the end pieces. And I've got some adjustment left and right to allow me to line things up. So that looks pretty good to me. So we'll go ahead and we'll cut out all the front pieces. That's everything done. You can see we've ended up, we've got the fronts with the concealed groove inside, and we've got all the side pieces done as well. Final router job is I want to put the groove down the underside of the front of the drawer. It's going to be this router bit. You can see just basically a bull nose, a bullet sort of shape, and that's just going to go straight across here, and then that just gives me somewhere for my fingers to rest into and grip as I pull the drawer forward. So I'm going to go ahead and route those final pieces. I'm also going to take down the wall and I'll get that cut down to size. Nothing exciting, just using the MFT and tracks to get that down to size. And next time we'll get these drawers assembled and finished. See you then.